Hello, everybody, and welcome into a new edition of the Patriots Beat podcast here on the CLNS Media Podcast Network and on Patriots Press Pass. I'm Evan Lazar, joined as always by Alex Barth. And Alex, we are going to bring in a very special guest here in a few minutes. You see it in the headline of the show here today. We have Miguel Benzan, aka Pat's Cap, in the waiting room right now. So we're going to bring up Miguel here in a second. We're going to talk some Patriots salary cap. This is probably right now at this point of the offseason, other than who the heck are the Patriots going to draft at wide receiver, the number one questions that I get surround the salary cap. How much cap space do they have? How much wiggle room do they have? How can they move space around? What can they do with some of these bigger cap numbers that they have in these contracts? So we're going to get to all of that here in just a second with Miguel. But before we do, we have to shout out our sponsors at LinkedIn. These days, it can be hard to find and hire the right candidates for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs made it easier to find the people you want to talk to faster and for free. Create a free job post in minutes on LinkedIn Jobs to reach your network and beyond to the world's largest professional network of over 770 million people. Focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience, and use screening questions to get your role in front of only the most qualified, and use the simple tools on LinkedIn Jobs to quickly filter and prioritize who you like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs number one in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find candidates you want to talk to faster. Did you know every week nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? Post your job for free at linkedin.com/beat. That's linkedin.com/beat to post your job for free. And now that that is out of the way, we can welcome a man that needs no introduction whatsoever, but we're going to give him one anyways. It's Pat's Cap, Miguel Benzan, the number one Patriots cap whiz in the business. And about 95% of my Twitter followers are because of this man right here. So, Miguel, thank you so much for coming on with us today. And we're so excited to have you.
Glad to be on, Evan. Glad to be on. I'll never forget. You're terrific. I just glad you're no longer just an aspiring journalist.
Yes. Yeah. Miguel remembers back in the day when people used to get on me for being an aspiring journalist, Alex, not an actual journalist, which I guess I am now, according to Miguel.
Yes.
So I'll take
Yes.
it. All right. So I think this is where we want to start, Alex. I realize you have not said anything in these first 3 minutes of this show. So
That's
first
got to
of
be
all,
a record.
that's got to be like, how do we keep this guy's mouth shut for 3 minutes, right? I mean, come on. Anyways, I think the first thing that is on everybody's mind, Miguel, when they pull up your page and they
Yeah.
see $3.698 million in salary cap space for 2022. This is
Yes.
with the rollover and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And we all say, oh God, that is
Okay.
not a lot of space to do anything of value for this team in the offseason. But tell us why we shouldn't be freaking out just yet about the fact that the Patriots are tied up against the cap.
Because it's 2 months from March 6th, close to 2 months from March 16th. They got several ways to create cap space. We can go over most of them, or if not all of them, but there are several ways to get it. It is tight against the cap because they didn't carry over as much cap space as the previous year. Previous year they carried over 19 million. This year they carried over just over $100,000. It's to be expected. It's tight, but they have ways to create cap space. So I'm not. And if I can do it, I'm an amateur, and I do this as a hobby. If the Patriots, who have fresh paying people to do it, they could definitely come up with these ways. And let's remember, the Saints created $110 million in cap space last year, and they hardly cut anyone.
So, realistically, I know that there's so much that's going to happen here, and it's hard to pin down an exact number. But what's a realistic range you kind of expect them to be at, to start free agency, or at least to work on their own free agents? What's a realistic, projection instead of I know you're trying to be in the moment.
Okay, no, so they could get to 40, 35 if they don't, and that's without cutting people. I'm like, so right. I push out in my scenario, right? I can easily create cap space with Judon, Hunter Henry, Devon Garshaw, reaching a deal with Jake Bailey, cutting N'Keal Harry, cutting Henry Anderson, extending Nelson Aguilar, extending Isaiah Wynn. All right, and I got up to, hold on a minute. That gets me up to $31 million in cap space.
It's not
And
bad.
that doesn't include their own free agents, right? Because the next place
No. So the only free agents that includes would be I would have tended Jacoby Myers, and I would have attended Jakob Johnson.
right.
So,
So
real quick while we're on that, what level did you tender Jacoby at?
Second round.
You think they tender him at a second round level?
I think they tender on the second round level. Yes. No, in recent history, no one who has received a second round tender has received an offer sheet.
Right.
From another team.
You don't think they'd tender Gunner at all?
I used to think they were tunning. I used to think that. I no longer do.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with the Myers thing. I think that what's it, 3.9 million for the second round tender,
yes.
I believe that's pretty good value for a guy that led your team in targets and receptions this past year. Now, the other question, I want to talk to you about all the different ways that they can create cap space in a second. But you mentioned that they could get to about $30 million in cap space by doing a bunch of different things. And the name that comes to mind first for me is obviously J.C. Jackson. And the fact of the matter is that the franchise tag for cornerbacks is just under $18 million. So even if they get to that $30 million number, if they franchise tag JC, that's about a little bit more than half of it gone just like that. Right.
Yeah.
So it really feels like that player obviously is a player that the Patriots would like to retain as a 26-year-old second team All-Pro, and a team that doesn't have cover talent coming out the wazoo anymore, right? It's not like they got corners in the back that they can just pull up from the warehouse and be like, oh, here's another number one corner. So J.C. Jackson's a player that I think it's very dangerous to let him just walk right out the door because of the fact that they don't have anything behind him. But at the same time, that's a big number. What would you see as, first of all, if they were to tag J.C., do you think that would be their big move? Like they would kind of have to be done in terms of what else they would do. And
yes,
also,
if they go into free agency with J.C. Jackson tagged, that's probably going to be their big move, unless they decide to cut some players who are pretty good and not hurt. All right. And so, like, you could create cap space. Like, for example, with cutting, I said this on Phil Perry's thing. I mentioned this name, all right, because it's true. You could cut Shaq Mason and create a lot of cap space. I wouldn't do it. But if you were talking about cutting players, he would create the cap space without pushing any money. All right. He's the number one cut because the Patriots have a lot of players with guaranteed salary. So you can't get a lot of cap savings that way. All right. So you in terms of cutting a player, Shaq Mason is the number one, creates the most cap space. Would I do it? No. I have on my the spreadsheet, folks, that you can't see, but I'm looking at. I could create cap space by extending him one more year, and I get $3.6 million in cap space by extending Shaq Mason. That's what I would do. But I'm saying if the Patriots decide to go into the free agency, which with J.C. Jackson tagged, they're going to probably have to cut some other players like a Shaq Mason or Jonathan Jones or a Kyle Van Noy, which but those are things they would have to do. Or the other thing they could do is could push out a lot more money than they did and have done in the past. And I do want to say, folks, like, for example, if you convert Matthew Judon's salary, most of his salary, into a signing bonus, all right, it doesn't necessarily mean that Robert Kraft is writing a check that day for the signing bonus. They could just say, hey, Matthew Judon, we just give you that when you get paid for your weekly paycheck, we'll just give you that signing bonus at that time, which allows, frees up cash flow for Robert Kraft so he could go then sign free agents.
So
interesting.
My second question on JC is, let's say the Patriots do actually make a serious offer for an extension, a multi-year extension, and not just the tag. Where do you see his market being at? And do you think that would be realistic based off of their past history, that they would hand out a contract that's, let's say, 5 years, $90+ million to JC Jackson?
Every year, Evan, the Patriots do something they've never done in the past before. If so, for me, it would be signing J.C. Jackson to a long-term deal. If he was to become a free agent and wasn't tagged, I would expect him to get around $20 million. I think if he signs a deal with the Patriots, he's giving them a discount. How much of a discount is up to him. He could probably justify getting signing an $18 million deal. I sent that out in a tweet, and that still would work for the Patriots. Because in my scenario, I would give him more guaranteed money than Jalen Ramsey got in this deal. And for me, as a player, I'd rather have guaranteed money rather than a big deal number.
Well, the other side of that too. Sorry,
Yeah.
just the other side of that too is if they reach a deal versus tagging him, that $18 million number you're throwing out there, that's not all cap hit.
Oh no, no!
Versus
no. I dropped that big. That's a big time drop. You get to. That's why. So like, you could tag him and the deadline to do so is March 8th. That gives you 8 days to reach a deal, and I think that's what happened with Vince Wilfork. They tagged him and then they reached a deal before free agency started, and I think that's what they're hoping for. I mean, there's no way if they reach an extension, they're cutting that $17 million number probably in half, if not more.
Okay.
Yeah. So I wanted you to explain that as well a little bit more, Miguel.
Okay.
Because I think when people look at the cap, they say, "Oh, well, if we sign." I'm just using an example here. If we sign JC to an $18 million deal, then we lose $18 million in cap space. But what we have seen with the Patriots for years is that they stagger the contracts. Correct me if I'm wrong, but they usually backload deals, right? Where they
front load cash, backload the cap number.
Right.
So the player gets a lot of money up front, but with a low salary. That's what they did. Practically every free agent they signed last year had a $1 million salary last year, and then it greatly increased this year. So you could sign J.C. Jackson, and I'm just doing it off the top of my head, and I don't have that $18 million projection. So I'm saying, let's just give him 4 years, $80 million. That's $20 million a year. All right, and that's just I don't think that would get that from the Patriots, but it's a lot easier to use that way. All right, give him a $1 million salary. Give him a $40 million signing bonus. All right, that's $10 million a year. That means it's prorated $10 million in there, $1 million salary. That's $11 million. You save $6 million in the cap. I'm just using round numbers, folks. It's probably be much more. The signing bonus would be probably much less than that, but just a lot easier if I just say $10 million.
Yeah, right. Alex, go ahead.
And I dog like that answer too. That's good.
Yeah, Alex always makes at least one appearance.
Oh, that's your dog?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So I guess when it comes to Jackson, they can realistically, and at the same time, he's not going to take anything less than I've seen the number projected for the franchise tag anyway. I think you had 17.2. I think
that's Joel Corey, who's a franchise tag guru, has figured out that it's going to be $17.287 million. All right.
Right.
Alex, you could say you don't think he's going to take less. I personally don't know the gentleman, so I'm not going to feel comfortable speaking for him.
Fair enough. Well, okay, let me ask you this too. This is kind of just a general cap question.
Yeah.
For my own personal research, because I use both Over the Cap and Spot Track kind of.
Stop using Spot Track.
So okay,
I knew he was
every
gonna
time
say
I
that.
use Spot Track, I get called out for something being incorrect. Should I not be using Spot Track?
You should not using Spot Track. I know.
Okay,
hopefully,
noted.
I actually increased my umbrella insurance because I'm afraid they're going to hear this as general couple of years ago, because I know that I am going to say something like that out loud. Don't use the Spot Track.
Okay.
I'll say this for example. Patriots ended with a cap space last year, $100,000. All right.
Yeah.
I was off by $50,000. All right. The cap's around $200 million. So 50,000 is small.
Yeah, no, that's a good number.
They had the Patriots ending cap space number as $6.4 million.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
They were $6.3 million off. $6.3 million off. If you were running a business, okay, would you go to a company that was that far off?
No, you've
Okay.
convinced me. You've convinced me.
Okay.
Over the cap is good though, because I don't want to
Over the cap is
24/7.
over the cap is way better than Spotrac.
Okay.
They're just slower than updating their page
Okay.
than Spotrac. Okay. But if you want accurate number, go to over the
I
cap.
got you. All right.
And I'll
That's
say
fine.
this for the beat writers who's gonna listen to this. You tweet out a number, an article that includes a Spotrac number, I'm not gonna retweet it. I will
Okay.
not retweet
I'll
any
stop doing that then.
articles that has Spotrac in it. I hardly ever respond to tweets that mention that site. They are okay. So,
All right.
I
that's
as
my
soon as Alex brought up Spotrac, I knew this was going to go down.
I
this
didn't know
road,
this
so
was
I'm
such
just
a
sitting
hot
here
button
laughing.
issue. I know that I've been called. You've called me out for it before.
yeah.
But I
Literally,
didn't know I love it. But
literally, Alex. I literally increased my umbrella insurance because I'm afraid of them suing me because I'm going to say something like this.
Okay,
There you go.
let's take the vendetta off of Spotrac for a second, and I want to ask you about some of these players,
Okay.
Miguel, that you mentioned a little bit earlier. The guy that I want to start with
Yes.
is Jonnu Smith, because
Can't touch him.
I watched a lot of Jonnu Smith tape today, looking back at his Tennessee tape, looking into his 2021 tape to figure out what the heck happened. That this
Okay.
guy that they paid 4 years, $50 million, $31.5 million guaranteed to in the offseason has 300 yards and a touchdown in his first season with the Patriots. But you just mentioned it right there. The biggest problem that my research came up with was they can't move him. Like, no one's going to trade for his contract,
Right.
and they can't cut him because of the dead cap implications on his contract. So could you just explain, first of all, the dead cap number, and then how they could possibly rework or review or restructure Johnny's cap hit for next year?
Okay, because he's got salary guaranteed this year, okay, and he also has salary guaranteed next year, all right, and then he has 3 years of signing bonus proration, all right. So if you cut a player with all that then hits the cap. So if you were to cut Jonnu Smith, you would lose $12.5 million in cap space.
Yikes.
Right, because his dead money is that much larger than his current cap number. All right, like you said, I don't think anybody's trading for him.
Right. Is there
Right.
any incentive for anybody? Like, is he cheaper to another team to a point where it might be worth another team that could use him differently to trade for him?
The other team would have to agree that his salary that he's due this year, next year, and is worth what they're going to give up. And what are you going to get in return?
Right.
Right. Is he going to be? Because the Patriots would eat about $13 million in dead money, create about $2 million in cap space. All right. And what is the team, the acquiring team, they're going to say, I'm going to give them the Patriots what to get what? And I just don't see it happening.
Right.
So like we're not in fantasy football where you can give your team, make these outrageous trades and your friends will just laugh it off. You say no and just laugh it off. All right.
Right.
You can't, the other teams just offer something and hope that they're idiots. I mean,
right.
Bill O'Brien's no longer a GM.
Right. So they're kind of stuck with Jonnu
for this year,
short term, for 2022 especially. But what could they do in terms of pushing the money into future years? Is that something that you think that they would do based off of prior history?
No, they want now with Jonnu Smith because his cap numbers already for future years are so high. Why would you increase it even more? They won't. They're not touching. I'd be shocked. I'm going on record right now. January 20th, 5/20. They're not touching his deal.
Okay. So let me ask you about another free agent. And this is a little different because you talked before about guys that maybe they could extend. Yeah. And I look at Nelson Agholor and, they need to add wide receivers. They're going to need to swap somehow. I know with Agholor, again, from my research, and you know better than me, but I believe they save $5 million if they cut him, but they save $10 million if they trade him.
Trade him, right? But you don't. Yeah, but you can't trade a player until the league year starts. So if you want so you have to line up the trade before free agency starts. Okay, all right, yeah. So you could create cap space by trading him. Yes.
That they've done that, right? Didn't they do that with Trent Brown last year, where they traded for him unofficially like a week before? 2 weeks
Yes,
before
and Marcus
free
Cannon
agency?
too. And Marcus
Right, and then
Cannon
it
too.
became official. So
Yeah.
is that something you think is realistic? Assuming they could find a trade partner for
Finding,
Aguilar.
okay, there's the issue. Where do you find a trade partner when he's
See-
gonna get? He's gonna have. He's got $5 billion salary guaranteed. He's not giving. Is he gonna? You're not. He's not gonna give that up.
And
Right.
see, I feel like so. So how much cap space would the team taking him on absorb? Would it be 10 million?
$10 million
I
for
feel like
on a 1-year deal. He's gonna be on a 1-year deal.
if you find, I don't think that's totally unrealistic. I mean, it's not likely, but maybe
Okay,
like a
but so
pick
what are you
swap
giving
kind of
up for
thing.
him?
And like a pick swap kind of thing, just because I'm wondering, it frees up cap space, and realistically, how many receivers are they going to keep next year, right? Because they've got to add.
They
and
got to add.
They already kept a ton this year, so I mean, N'Keal Harry's one spot,
Okay.
but is that your 1-for-1 swap, right? If you add another receiver, it feels like another guy's maybe got to come off the roster. So I'm just
Malcolm
wondering.
Perry, who they just gave a $55,000 signing bonus, will probably. So that's why one of the reasons I moved off of Gunner is I'm saying I don't think I think they're gonna try to get a returner and a wide receiver elsewhere.
Okay,
No,
interesting.
So let me piggyback off this from Alex for a second. Have you seen across the league at all, Miguel, in other sports like basketball, baseball, that you have these trades that are straight salary dumps, right?
No,
like
you can't do that in the NFL.
Okay.
The Saints try to do that, and
Right.
and the NFL shut them down last year.
So
really-
the Saints
What
tried
deal
to
was
give
that?
Huh?
What
They
deal
were
was
trying.
that?
Oh my gosh, who were they trying to do? It was, my goodness gracious.
They just tried to trade.
It was right around the trade deadline. Oh my gosh.
Oh, it was during the season.
It was
Did they
during
just
the
try to trade a player for like a pick straight up?
You could do that, but it was during the season, and I know they were shut down. I'm gonna have to DM Nick Underhill, who covers the Saints. I can't remember off the top of my head. I'm getting old.
Yeah. So the point is that like the Patriots putting, and I'm not saying they would do this, I'm just saying hypothetically, the Patriots putting a 3rd round pick with Nelson Aguilar to dump them to some other team just to get rid of the salary cap hit.
They could do that. They could do that, but that's not what I thought you were saying.
Oh, okay. I'm just saying, like, if the Patriots gave up something of value with Nelson Aguilar to dump his, just basically, and their purpose is to dump the contract.
What would the other team give the Patriots?
Something marginal, right?
We've seen them do these pick swap trades before.
Okay,
like
fair enough.
That's
allowed.
Like that.
That's allowed. That's allowed. But there was. I thought you were talking like the NBA and straight cash.
No.
That's right. Okay, I'm sorry.
No,
I'm sorry.
and I think me and him are both kind of saying the same thing. Where hey, if you take this contract and you get a decent player, we'll let you move up 30 spots in the draft or whatever.
Okay. Oh, that's possible.
Like that. Okay.
So that the fact that
I guess just to finish my question.
Yeah.
Is that's more reasonable than outright releasing him? I know you don't think it's totally.
No, I don't think. I that's more likely to happen than releasing him.
Interesting.
It's funny because we're talking about this. 8 months after they went on this spending spree, and now we're just trying to dump some of these guys off the Patriots salary.
No one's perfect. No one's perfect, Evan.
Right.
And I'll just say this, and I forget, it was in the Athletic, and have said this before. Like every big money free agent wide receiver last year, not one of them, I think it was 11, who got signed for a deal that's average over $10 million. Not one of them got 1,000 receiving yards.
Yeah.
So the Patriots weren't the only one who misjudged a free agent wide receiver.
So I want to bring you back. You said no to Jonnu being restructured or pushing money into future years. You mentioned Matthew Judon though. That one you see as a possibility.
Oh, I would be shocked if they don't do it, because literally you could create about $6.64 million in cap space. All right, for this year, and his numbers in 2023 and 2024 are about $10 million less than the top of the edge market. So like right now, if I do what they do, his cap number in 2022 becomes $19.8 million, which is about $10 million less than the top guys.
And what you mentioned Hunter Henry too, I think briefly. Would you say the same thing for him as well?
Hunter Henry, I would extend him another year. All right. and then I would drop his, and then I would save $5 million in cap space.
So
Because
that
I would
that's
want
a-
him, because I know the reason I would extend him rather than just converting salary into signing bonus, because he has developed a rapport with Mac Jones. Might as well keep him on the same. You keep him with Mac Jones during his entire rookie deal.
I think too with extending him, a lot of these guys they signed last year, Hightower, Jonnu, they were signed to 4-year deals, and Henry's a 3-year deal, right?
Right. They
So
was
you
yeah.
kind
So
of
I never understood why they did Hunter Henry for 3, but
right,
it
but
is
you
what it
kind
is.
of round out that window
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
And that all lines up. That would all line up right with Mac Jones' 5th-year option season.
So like his because he's playing 4 years on his rookie deal and then he's got a
Right.
5th year option.
Right.
2025 would be his 5th year option.
So it rounds out because
Yeah.
I talk a lot. If people watch the show a lot, I talk a lot about the 4-year window for this team. So
Yeah.
gets Henry right into that window.
I totally believe that's why I think they're gonna more move money than cut players.
So
Right.
let me ask you another question now in kind of a different direction, because we've talked a lot about what this team should do at tackle. And this isn't, I guess, directly a salary cap question, but Isaiah Wynn, he's on that 5th-year option. He's making, what is it? It's about 10 million, just over 10 million this year.
$10.413 million.
Okay. And he's a starting caliber tackle. I don't think he's upper echelon in the league, but a guy of his ability on his contract, what kind of value do you think he has being paid that much if the Patriots would look to move him?
Look to move him.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness gracious. You're picking up a player. He has all the leverage. Oh, man. See, you don't want to. You have to agree to extension beforehand. Yeah, I mean
he has more value if you extend him.
Yeah, I mean, if his acquiring team knows what he's gonna sign for, you know what I'm saying? So like sorry, I misunderstood the question then.
So I mean it more. You have a starting caliber tackle at whatever he is, 26 years old.
Yeah.
That you only have to pay $10 million.
Right.
Like because here's where I'm coming from. It like I'm looking at it. Me and Evan have talked about this. If you bring back Trent Brown and you keep Michael Onwenu at tackle, could you move Isaiah Wynn to maybe pick up draft capital? And what would his value be? Because I look at it where here's a young player who's a starting caliber player at a premium position with a very low cap hit. And I'm just crunching the numbers. Is that an accurate assessment?
I would say having a player who's $10 million on a $10 million salary, was on a 1-year deal. If you don't agree to an extension before you trade for him, you are giving him all the leverage. That's lowers his value. So he has more value if you tell Isaiah Wynn, we want to trade you. You go find a trade partner and you can talk to him about a deal, an extension. Then that increases his value. You're not trade. I don't, say because you could trade a player and he has no say on it.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But but then if you work with Isaiah Wynn to trade him, he increases his trade value for you.
Interesting, because I guess it's interesting you put it that way, because I was thinking about it more in the sense, and we've seen the Patriots do this, right? They trade for guys on the last year of their rookie deal is almost like a tryout season, guys who maybe underperform their draft slot. So I was wondering if they could maybe get somebody else to bite on that. But now, based on what you're telling me, it's actually more likely that a team trading for him is going to want to have him locked up.
Yes.
Okay, interesting.
Right, because if you're going to give up a 2nd-round pick for Isaiah Wynn, you're not going to then let him walk after 1 year. That would most likely be your thinking.
Right, even though the Patriots have done that time and time again with all
the Patriots will do it because they got Bill Belichick, who's got job security.
Exactly.
That's a good point.
Yeah, he's like,
he doesn't care if it works out or not. All right, a couple of last ones here from me, Miguel. N'Keal Harry, obviously. Gone. But whether it's trade or it's just releasing him, does that move the needle that much? Because I know
you create more cap space by trading him because he's got like $700,000 in guaranteed salary. That guaranteed salary would go to his new team. So you create more cap space by trading him than releasing him.
Got it. Devon Godshaw, another player.
Real quick on that, while we're on that draft class, does the same thing apply to Juwan Williams?
Juwan Williams doesn't have any more guaranteed salary.
Oh, so you can cut him, no dead cap, no nothing?
Right, right. He has no. Yeah, so it's just all straight. Only any dead money would be his signing bonus proration.
Gotcha.
Okay. Devon Godshaw is another one that I believe they can create some cap space with, right?
Yes, I would. So, for example, keeping on with my theme of extending, I would extend him and I create $2.7 million.
Got it. So let me look at my list here of any
And
other
because
players.
and one B, I'll say this, folks. He has $2.5 million of his salary guaranteed. So his that lessens how much cap space you can create by cutting him.
Got it. And
so between those three, between the three recent free agents we've talked about, Henry, Jonnu, and Devon Godshaw, that's what, $14-15 million?
$14.34 million.
Now you're almost at the JC Jackson number. So that's
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
pretty interesting how that lines up.
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
See, now you get the method of the madness, right, Alex?
Yeah.
Like now you see how the wheels are turning. All right. Last one here, and then I got one more big picture question for you. But you mentioned Shaq Mason as a guy that you can do either move his money or extend him or even release him. You also mentioned Jonathan Jones. The Jones one worries me a ton because
I just had him on the list. I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it. But okay. But I wanted to get to a round number.
We saw what it looked like when they didn't have Jonathan Jones in the slot at the end of the season. So that's what worries
me. To me, not having him in the Super Bowl against the Eagles cost them the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And then not having him at the end of this season cost them games.
Right. Okay. So the other one I wanted to talk to you about was Shaq Mason, who is a great player, and I think one of the more underrated guards in the league.
Thank you.
Theoretically, you could bring back Ted Karras on a much cheaper contract, move Mike Onwenu to guard where they've been trying to get him in at guard this entire time.
Okay.
And save a bunch of money by trading or doing something with Shaq Mason. Again, I hate it because I think it's a good player, but just in terms of allocating resources and cost effectiveness and stuff like that, it's not. You have two starting caliber guards in Karras and on Onwenu for a lot cheaper than one Shaq Mason, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. But I will say this: Mason's actually younger than Karras.
Right.
Okay. So, huh? He's younger than he's about 6 months younger than Karras.
It's like he's been here for 10 years.
I said that blew my mind too when I looked it up. Okay, but I'm saying so like I understand. I think Shaq Mason, I'd rather extend him. I'd rather keep Onwenu and let Teddy Karras go. Out of the two guys, I'd rather keep Shaq Mason than Karras. You made a good argument, Evan, for keeping Karras and letting go Mason. I'm on the other end. It's just I'm on the other side of the ledger.
Evan, can I get a couple in here before you do your big picture question?
Yes, go.
So these are further down the road in the offseason, but one is I'm always fascinated by the whole June 1st thing. Players' contracts change status post June 1st. Are there any guys this year that could move or restructure whatever that, specifically it needs to happen pre-June 1st or post-June 1st, or can this all pretty much be done whenever?
The one guy I would think that June 1st might come into play is Devin McCourty. If he retires, right?
Yeah.
And he could retire, right? And they agree with the Patriots to do what the Drew Brees did. All right. He lowers his salary to the minimum, then retires on June 2nd. He does that. He creates about $3.18 million in cap space this year. I mean, he's the only one I'm thinking that would apply that June 2nd thing that would apply to.
So Bobby Bonilla him. I don't hate that. And then my other question is that's essentially what it would be, right? Because I'm guessing if he lowers his salary, it means it's paid out over more years.
No. He lowers his salary and then he retires. Then he retires on June 2nd, and then his salary becomes zero.
Interesting. Okay.
And
then my other one is, and I know people are going to hate this question, but I got to ask it. When the cap is considered in regards to the draft, are the slots for the draft picks built in or not? And how much cap? I know this is an imperfect question because you don't know what they're getting back, but how much cap would the Patriots save if they traded out of the first round?
Oh my goodness gracious! The slots are already by the yes, the draft picks are by the slot. Oh my gosh! You have to go to overthecap.com/draft to answer your question. I don't know it off the top of my head.
Right. Would it like just based on
maybe? I mean, what are you getting back? That's the whole thing. You got to tell me you trade the first round pick for what? Are you
So
trading?
let's say, I mean, the
Are you
standard
trading
is
for a 2023 pick?
future pick.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you're out of the draft. Oh, okay. Yeah, hold on, man. Then I
Like
actually was doing.
would it
I,
free up a realistic amount of money, or is it negligible to
I
the
mean,
conversation?
the first draft pick is so cheap.
Okay.
I don't even worry about it. So, but like literally, if they were to, I looked it up earlier today. If they were to stay at 21, and
Yeah.
if over the cap is projection, Nick Cordy does this, as he's right, it cost them $2.87 million in cap space. His cap number would be $2.87 million. It wouldn't be this cap hit when they sign him, but that his cap number would
Okay.
eventually be 2.87 million, which is when the cap is over $200 million is insignificant.
It's not a
About
ton. Okay.
It's 1%. It's about 1%. It's not worth. It's not worth it.
Okay.
It's not-
That was my question.
Okay,
That was
it's
my
not worth
question.
it.
I didn't think
Okay.
it was, but we had it here. I want to make sure we had
Okay,
it. So
okay.
everybody can breathe a sigh of relief about that one. So there you go.
Okay.
All right, Alex, you got all your own
Yeah, I'm
questions
good.
out, so now
I'm
you can
good.
write all your
I'm all
columns
good.
about all these things and credit.
Oh wait, no, I
Miguel,
have one
please,
more
all right?
because I can't
Yeah, one
find it online.
What?
Yeah.
When do they have to? What is the deadline to tender RFAs? What is the window?
3:59 p.m. March 16th.
When can
There
they
you go.
start now?
They could if they wanted to, but they don't.
Okay, so I didn't know if that window opens right away or
teams hardly ever announce they're gonna tender the player until right near the
okay.
start of the league year. They
Cool.
could, but they don't.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay, so I want to wrap it up and kind of we threw a lot of names and a lot of numbers at people. So I want to wrap it up by doing this. First and foremost, give me like the 3 moves that you think the Patriots are most likely to make to free up cap space.
Okay, hold on a minute.
before
I gotta switch back to my notebook, the right workbook. Hold on a minute. The 3 moves they're definitely gonna make. Okay, this is it. They're gonna extend Matthew Judon. They're gonna convert salary into signing bonus for Matthew Judon. They extend Hunter Henry. They are going to. Okay, the 3 most. Hold on a minute.
I got you on the 3rd one.
Yeah. Because I gotta make sure I get this one right. Hold on a minute. Oh.
Well, it's what? It's between what? Godshaw, Harry.
Yeah, no, it's Godshaw or Henderson, who I think is going to happen. Okay, because if Henry Henderson is healthy enough, they're cutting him. I'm going to go with Godshaw being the thing.
So they're going to cut Godshaw or extend him.
No, extend Godshaw.
Okay, so restructure or convert salary into signing bonus on Judon, extend
Hunter Henry,
extend
Godshaw. Yeah, those 3 things I think are going to happen.
Okay, and then the last question I wanted to ask you here, just so that you can hold us all tight and tell us it's all going to be okay. If the Patriots were interested in, let's say, going out and trading or signing a number 1 wide receiver, a stud wide receiver to pair with Mac Jones, they could feasibly figure out the cap ramifications of that move to make it happen.
They would, yes, they could probably make it. The player would have to agree to a 5-year deal. So you would spread his bonus over 5 years rather than 4. The player would probably have to do an option bonus where he gets a big bonus in 2023 that's prorated over the last 4 years of his deal. If players are willing to do that, the Patriots could probably get a shiny, I say shiny, a number 1 wide receiver.
So you heard it here first from Miguel Benzon that the Patriots are going to sign Devontae Adams, and everything is going to be just exactly what we all wanted, right?
Okay, Devontae Adams is $27 million. You can forget 20. You're not getting him. He's getting $27 million.
Maybe Calvin Ridley, a trade for Calvin Ridley, $11 million, right?
Okay,
that's not too bad.
The idea that the Patriots could beat out teams, with draft picks is laughable.
Right.
Okay. Okay, because he would have to say, "I'm only going to go to the Patriots," and then that makes he has to tell the Falcons, "I only want to go to the Patriots," and then that's the only way I can expect Calvin Ridley to be traded, because every other the Jets got better draft picks, the Dolphins have better draft picks, the Eagles have better draft picks. You can make the argument maybe you also want to play for them, all right, but teams can control where the player goes.
Right. Well, I'm sticking with Devontae Adams. That one sounds good.
That's not happening.
I know. Miguel, thank you so much for joining us
Okay, no problem.
and simplifying all this for us. And once again, everybody go ahead and follow Pat's Cap on Twitter. If you're not doing it already, you're obviously doing Patriots Twitter wrong. And Miguel, you're still working with Habitat, right?
Yes, please. Please go to my pinned tweet on Twitter. And if you can't afford to do so, donate some money to my to that. And if you use Amazon.com, go to smile.amazon.com and make half of the Habitat of Humanity your chosen charity. Doesn't cost you any money. Jeff Bezos has plenty of money. Might as well, say,
There you go.
there you go.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Miguel. We'll have you on again soon.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Have a good night. Okay, well, that's why he's the best in the cap business right there, because there's just so much information that I can't possibly fathom how Miguel keeps it all together and all straight. But his point about Calvin Ridley, who I wanted to talk about here, Alex, before we wrap it up, it was interesting that the Patriots, if they do find themselves in a bidding war for Calvin Ridley, are probably going to lose that bidding war.
Yeah, unless, I think you get to a point where maybe you see if the Falcons really like Isaiah Wynn, they do need help on the offensive line. Maybe they're high on a guy like Chase Winovich or Josh Uche, these edge rushers that the Patriots don't want to play. They need pass rushers as well. So maybe you throw a player in there to sweeten the deal. But yeah, they don't have, I wouldn't say they don't have a lot of draft capital, but they don't, they don't have a lot. They don't have a little. I think they have 6 picks. So they kind of the standard. And again, it's the 21st pick. It's, towards the bottom of the round. So
makes all the sense in the world from a stylistic perspective. And I know the Patriots were interested on a short list with Calvin Ridley in the 2018 draft. They end up going Isaiah Wynn. Ridley goes 3 picks later, but he's the type of receiver with the route running polish and the explosiveness and the inside outside versatility. Those are the types of guys that you want to try to target, I would think, if you're New England. But it's a good point by Miguel that they don't necessarily have the cap or the capital, I should say, the draft capital to go out there and win a bidding war. A couple more things here before we wrap up. Dave Ziegler, Patriots de facto general manager, and Jerod Mayo, both interviewing with the Las Vegas Raiders, I believe on the same day, which could mean that the Raiders have in mind potentially pairing those two together as a duo out there in Vegas. How much of a hit do you think that losing either one of those guys would be? We can start with Ziegler, who I think is maybe a little bit of an unknown compared to Mayo, obviously, for fans. But in my mind, Alex, since the Patriots have handed the keys over to Dave Ziegler in the scouting department with Nick Caserio's departure to Houston, they've been a better drafting team for it, right? The last couple of classes have certainly been better than the last couple at the end of the Caserio era. So I think that Ziegler would be unsung loss, right? Like something that would fly a little bit under the radar, and a lot of brain power leaving the Gillette Stadium facility over the last couple of years if Ziegler also walks.
Yeah, and I think, look, Mayo's a really good coach. It's nothing against Jerod Mayo, but I think with a lot of the uncertainty of what's going on the defensive side of the ball in terms of coaching, it's hard to exactly qualify his departure. I think something that's gone under talked about is the potential loss of both Ziegler and Elliott Wolf, who's interviewed. I don't think he interviewed with the Raiders, but I'm pretty sure it's the Vikings and the Broncos. I know he had multiple interviews, and he dates back, he was with the Packers, and the Packers have had a ton of good drafts. And to see the draft the Patriots had last year, which was their best, seems like it's their best in a while, right? To see them have that draft, and these guys are probably D2 architects of that draft, to see those guys kind of go out the door, you hate to see it, because again, it was a really good draft, and you kind of hope that they'd be able to string a couple of those together. I'm not saying they can't still this year. Obviously, those guys did a lot of the legwork for this draft. They were here throughout the year, and who knows, like the people who step in for them could be good too. But I think like Mayo would be a big loss, but it's different. It's just a different situation because of it. Look, Mayo should have played a bigger role. That's kind of the point here. Yeah. Is Mayo should have played a bigger role in what they were doing. He didn't. He's going to go elsewhere. It probably hurt them more, him leaving, if he had done more. It's hard to say he's going to be this big loss when we don't know exactly how much he did versus Steve and Matt Patricia. Sure. I think with the two front office guys, Wolf and Ziegler, I think we kind of have a general idea of what they did. And the draft as a whole was excellent. So whatever role they played, you hope they're back to play it. So those are the two for me that kind of stand out as potential hits if they leave.
Yeah, it's interesting because Belichick and McDaniels went to the Alabama Pro Day and saw Mac Jones up close at that Pro Day. But all the other quarterback throwing days, it was Elliott Wolf who went there, right? To Trey Lance, Justin
Yeah.
Fields, all the other circuits on the Pro Bowl or on the pro days was Wolf, Ziegler, that part of the staff going out there and watching those guys. I think the one thing that you see with Ziegler's team that they've put together in these last couple draft classes since he's taken over is back to attention to detail in terms of bringing in athletes, right? Just bringing in explosive players, bringing in guys that like a Christian Barmore and a Kyle Duggar. I know Mac Jones is more of that traditional Patriots, just prototype type of pick and not necessarily an uber athlete. But I think in the last couple of Caserio drafts, you had N'Keal Harry, you had Sony Michel, you had Isaiah Wynn, you had guys that were not necessarily known for athleticism, but maybe in Wynn's case are more technically sound, or in Sony's case, we're just going to get the job done or fill the role. And I think the Patriots have made a bigger emphasis on finding explosive players like a Duggar, like a Barmore, like an Uche, like Ramondre, that maybe are not necessarily as refined as some of these other guys, but have much higher ceilings than some of the players that they've drafted in the past. And I think that's a good focus that the Patriots have made in the drafting. You mentioned Jerod Mayo. This whole thing with the defensive coaching staff, I don't know how ugly or how bad it really is. I don't. But at the same time,
I mean, they just gave up 47 points to an overrated.
Well, I know how bad the defense
looks.
Idea. I know how bad the defense looks on paper. What I mean, or in the eye test, what I mean is behind the scenes, I'm not sure how bad this actually got, but there's clearly a disconnect. And I think a lack of buy-in or a lack of belief in the game plan from a player perspective with the defensive coaching staff. And I don't know if that's Mayo. I don't know if that's Steve. But at the same time, in a way, as much as I think Jerod Mayo is a good coach and a smart mind, even if I want to hate on Steve, like I know a lot of people like to do, having a more unified voice leading the defense and not having people pull at each other in different directions might be ultimately, even if you have the worst coach in charge, at least you have one guy in charge, right? Instead of guys going to different people in the locker room and trying to pull things from there. It was very abundantly clear that during the 7-game winning streak, they were connected, they were whole, they were playing as one, and then down the stretch, it completely came apart. And it has to point to coaching and who's in charge and who these players are going to and pointing to when they need to, find out the game plan. What's my role? Do I like my role in the game plan? I think guys specifically that, I've heard that maybe we're thinking twice or challenging the game plans a little bit are obvious. Like Matthew Judon, I think was a little bit lost in the game plans and stuff like that.
He's dropping into coverage. I mean, can you blame him?
No, I don't blame him whatsoever. And I think a lot of these things that you hear as Hollywoodized and as perfect of a drama scenario as it might be painted, it's so obviously out there on the field that it's hard to deny what you see, right? In that the first 5 or 6 games, they looked one way on defense outside of the Brady game. And then it really felt like the Brady game, Bill ran the game plan, right? Because it was Tom Brady and he wanted to win that game. Then during the 7-game win streak, it feels like Bill came in and tried to fix some things that were going wrong with the defense. Then he gave it back over to the assistants and they fell apart again. I mean, it's pretty abundantly clear what happened, even if you don't have the inside information to put it together.
Well, I think you just look at, there's different tendencies and every coach believes in different things. We talked a lot about this on Tuesday and I said kind of along the lines that you're saying, right? I might have said it on the show. I might have said it on the other show. I lose track sometimes. Patriots Recap Podcast with Matt Dolph, 98.5thesportshub.com. But I agree with you. And I know some people might not want it to be Steve. I know some people might not want it to be Patricia, might not want it to be whoever. But the reality is, if it's just one person, we can haggle over who that one person should be. And there's a time for that. But if it's just one person giving the calls and designing the defense and all of that, it's just going to be easy. Like, for lack of a better term, give me a corporate flow chart for the defense with one person at the top. And Devin McCourty talked about it on his podcast. I don't have the exact quote in front of me. Or no, this wasn't McCourty's podcast. This was Phil Perry talked about this on NBC Sports Boston, which is basically there were different coaches designing the defense every week. And even if it's one coach at a time, it's like you're different people have different concepts. It's just the reality of it. They might be similar, but one week you're being asked to do one thing, the next week you're being asked to do the other thing. It's just hard to do your job that way. And I know the Patriots are a game plan defense, but this is different than that.
You still have to have foundational elements.
Exactly.
Right?
And that can change from person to person. So I think, again, whether it is Steve, if Gerard Mayo stays, he would be my guy. But whether it's him, Steve, Patricia, whether they bring in somebody else from the outside, I think you need it should be Bill. Forget Mayo. It should be Bill. I don't think it's going to be Bill, but there should be one guy for 17 weeks and then some, designing and calling the defense on a week-to-week basis. I just think that would help everybody out. And yes, I did call Josh Allen overrated before, because we get better metrics the more comments we get in the chats, and I'm playing you Bills fans like puppets. Dance for me. Keep getting my rev share up. I truly appreciate it. Thank you, Buffalo.
I think that Gerard Mayo, for some reason, and I think maybe it's because of his playing days and how good of a player he was for the Patriots, Gerard Mayo is the one that everybody thinks is the smartest guy in the room, right? Everybody looks at Steve and they look at Matty P and they say those guys don't know what they're doing, but Gerard does. And I do think that a lot of the players in that locker room, especially some of the older players that actually played with Gerard Mayo at the end of his tenure here with the Patriots, were looking at that and saying, Gerard should be in charge, right? Gerard knows what he's doing. And I also think when you look across the league at some other teams that have former players running the sides of the football, right? And it's not always defense, but in San Francisco, DeMeco Ryans is running their defense right now, and they're playing great football.
Real quick on DeMeco Ryans, because I saw this the other day that he interviewed for a head coaching job.
Yeah.
I thought DeMeco Ryans was still playing.
I know.
How old are we that DeMeco Ryans could be ahead? And it's nothing against DeMeco Ryans as a candidate,
but he retired a few years ago and then instantly became a coach. I mean, this
is nothing against DeMeco Ryans.
Right.
Like I'm sure his resume is great. How the hell is DeMeco Ryans already at the point where he can be a coach in terms of he just played yesterday? I'm getting so damn old. I hate it.
Yeah. So Gerard Mayo used to play, obviously. We know that. Gerard Mayo, I think, has a lot of people in that locker room among the Hightowers, the McCourties that played with Gerard Mayo that this is just speculation. This is just me talking. I'm not saying that this is 100% fact, but I think that a lot of those players from putting together tea leaves have definitely sided with Gerard Mayo and say he should be the guy in charge. He's the one that knows. He's the one that's walked in our shoes and been there before. You look across the league, I mentioned DeMeco Ryans, Byron Leftwich running the offense in Tampa Bay, Kellen Moore running the offense in Dallas, right? All these guys that were former coaches that are now becoming, or former players that are now becoming instant coordinators. And Gerard Mayo is still in this in-between phase here with the Patriots. And I don't think it's any mistake whatsoever that Gerard Mayo is interviewing for multiple head coaching opportunities. No. I think he wants out. I think he wants to be out of here because he looks at it and he says, I'm never going to be above Steve. I'm probably not going to be above Patricia now that he's back. And my only opportunity is to get out of here and go coordinate another defense or go head coach another team. So hopefully next year, my kind of wrap this up. Hopefully next year, even though you might think that Steve is not the best coach out of that group, or Patricia is not the best coach out of that group, having that one guy will be able to do something, right? In terms of the continuity and the chemistry of the D. But the last thing I wanted to ask you about this, Alex, if let's say Gerard Mayo does leave and does become a head coach elsewhere, or even if he stays and he still is in this role that he's in right now, do you think that inhibits them from bringing back a Hightower or bringing back a McCourty or bringing back some of these guys that maybe were gravitating the locker room more towards what Gerard Mayo was telling them versus what the Belichicks were telling them, for example?
I would think it helps them. If those guys like Gerard Mayo, I think they want to play with them. Here's a hypothetical for you. Gerard Mayo goes to Oakland. Donta Hightower maybe, wants a 1-year deal, and would he follow? They need veteran leadership there in Oakland. Would he follow Gerard Mayo to Oakland? Vegas. Would he follow Gerard Mayo to Vegas for 1 year to wrap up his career and play for his former teammate? Right? Would you see something like that? I wonder if because a lot of those guys are pending free agents. I wonder if those guys would follow Jerod Mayo for a year, something like that. So I don't know. I think they got to figure it out. And you laid out a really good case. So there's really no incentive. And obviously, Jerod Mayo aspires to be a head coach. I think most coaches aspire to be a head coach at some point. I think that with him specifically, though, there's not a lot of incentive for him to stay. No. Because like you said, he's and I don't know what he gets paid. Like maybe they pay him like a DC, but he's never going to be a DC here because he's not. If he was gonna pass Steve and become the DC over Steve, it would have happened already.
Right.
He wouldn't have stayed. The inside outside linebacker coach thing, like we all know what that is.
Yeah.
So I just think that it's hard to justify him sticking around unless something monumental changes or they really open the bank for him, which again, maybe they do. Like, at one point, I think Josh McDaniels was the highest paid coordinator in football, right? Either side of the ball.
He's still up there as one of the highest paid.
Right. And, it was at a time, I think this was right before the Colts thing. It was at a time where he truly was in demand and they were able to keep him around by kind of paying him like a lower salary head coach over almost a higher salary coordinator. But are they going to do that for Jerod Mayo if he's not even calling the plays? And again, if they're going to let him call the plays for 17 weeks, then he should be paid that because I think he'd be good at it. I think it would be an improvement. I just don't see it happening. So
yeah, the only coach that I can think of too in recent memory that's become a head coach that didn't call plays first is Sirianni in Philadelphia, because he was working under Frank Reich, who was calling plays in Indianapolis, right? So usually if you don't coordinate a side of the ball or you don't call the plays for a side of the ball, it's pretty difficult to get one of the 32 head coaching jobs. You have to really blow people away at the interview process. So I find this fascinating, and I know that's why everybody's talking about it, but it truly is fascinating to try to understand the logic, not necessarily about Steve being involved in calling plays and stuff, but trying to understand the logic of, you saw the first 6 weeks of the season when the assistants were in charge of the defense. Right. Then Bill seems to take back the reins a little bit and fix some of the things during the winning streak. Why give it back? Like, what's the method to the madness? And Bill's the smartest guy in the room, right? So I'm trying to figure out what the method to the madness is to put it back in the hands of the assistants and essentially let go of the rope of the season on the defensive side of the ball as a result, where they're playing so well that all Bill had to do was keep essentially coordinating the defense like he was during the winning streak, and everything would have been fine. Or not fine, but you know what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, well, I said it before the playoff game. I went on that whole rant about how Bill Belichick needs to remind everybody why he is the greatest coach of all time. And, he should have pushed Patricia, Steve, Mayo, all of them out of the way. Give me the whiteboard. Let's do this. And clearly that didn't happen. Matthew Judon dropping into coverage, things like that. Actually, we know from Devin McCourty, Steve was calling the plays Saturday night.
Yeah.
We know it wasn't Mayo. I still think it was Patricia a little bit. I do. Because the dropping the defensive end.
Well, the game plan and the play calls might be two different things.
That's fair. But
yeah,
I mean, I don't have the exact quote in front of me. I know Zach Cox from Nesson has it on his Twitter. I'll try to pull it up. But yeah, we know from him that Steve was calling the plays. It didn't work. Bill should have been designing. Bill should have been play calling, all of that. Yeah, so here's part of the quote from Devin McCourty. The play calls, they kept changing. We kept trying something different. I mean, Steve called everything we had Saturday night and just nothing went right for us. Bill's not mentioned in here. Mayo's not mentioned in here. Patricia's not mentioned in here. And I didn't hear the whole thing, but it's a pretty sizable quote. It's a pretty long quote. So
I find it interesting that he said that they try to call everything, because I remember in week 16, I asked him a similar question and he answered it in a similar way, saying we called a bunch of different things in this game. You almost wonder,
like it though, did it?
It didn't feel like it, but I asked him because Dante Hightower had made a comment earlier in the week of right after the week 16 loss, saying that he felt like the Bills knew what they were in. He felt like the Bills were recognizing what they were in and checking into the right plays and knowing how to beat the Patriots. And so I took that as, well, you're not disguising, you're oversimplifying, but it almost feels like it might have gone the opposite direction, where they try to put too much into the install instead of simplifying. They might have actually overcomplicated things a little bit, and that's why you get Matthew Judon dropping into coverage, right? Is because you're trying to be too cute with it.
Right. Well, that's textbook Patricia.
Right.
Textbook. Getting too
Yeah.
cute with it defensively is textbook Matt Patricia.
Yeah. So I think other last thing here, this is beyond just what happened on Wild Card Weekend with the Bills. Like, I think that's why we're talking about it so much, is because this was a 5-week problem. And really, if you look at the beginning part of the season, for the most part, this was like an 11-week problem, right? So this is a bigger problem than just the fact that they didn't have the personnel and they didn't have the health in the secondary to compete with Buffalo last Saturday night. This is a moving forward, big picture problem with the Patriots on the defensive side of the ball. And Brian Flores is not walking through that door to save them, right? Like, they're not.
So I wanted to bring that up. Like, I'm talking about there should be one person calling the defense. It would be criminal if Brian Flores doesn't get a head coaching job. But if somehow all these teams miss on him, I'll go pick him up. He doesn't even need a fly. I'll go drive the car right down to Miami and get him. Like, he should be back here. He should be the one making all the calls. That 2018 Super Bowl defensive game plan, Evan, we've talked about this, is still one of the best of the Bill Belichick era. Get me the guy who drew that up. If you can bring him back here, I don't think you think twice about it.
The fascinating part about that game plan, and we can talk about this on a different off-season type of show, but the best part about that game plan is actually how it made Sean McVay evolve as a coach as well. Because now, if you look at the Rams offense, they don't do as much of that stuff anymore that they did in 2018, because the Patriots gave everybody a blueprint on how to defend that offense. So McVay had to evolve, Shanahan had to evolve, and that whole scheme, LaFleur and Green Bay as well. All of those wide zone coaches had to completely evolve and put new things in and change the way that they approached it, because they saw the blueprint was out there that Bill Belichick and Brian Flores put out there. But a really fascinating topic to continue to monitor, especially with Jerod Mayo interviewing pretty much everywhere. He's interviewed with the Raiders, the Broncos, the Houston Texans, and pretty much every single opening has called Jerod Mayo. I believe he has something in Chicago going as well. So if he does get a head coaching job, it'll be really fascinating to see how the Patriots allocate the responsibilities on the defensive staff moving forward and what that means for the Patriots on that side of the ball. We want to thank our wonderful guest again, Miguel Benzon, Pat's Cap. Go follow him on Twitter if you're not already, and go listen to the first half of the show if you're looking for the Cap skinny on the Patriots. And he did a great job of condensing a very complex, numbers issue. I know there's a lot of information to throw at you guys, but we tried our best to point them in the right direction, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll have more guests and more people come on the show in the future as well. But Alex and I will be back on Tuesday. Alex, we're doing another show?
Yeah.
Tuesday. We'll do another show on Tuesday. We're going to get into we're going to start naming some names, I think, starting on Tuesday, of guys that we might want on the Patriots and guys that the Patriots might be able to target. And we'll talk about some of their own free agents as well. We decided to have Miguel on today instead of doing that, but we're going to have some of their own free agents and have that discussion about guys they bring back other than JC Jackson as well. So until then, signing off for Alex Barth, I'm Evan Lazar. Thanks for watching, everybody. Thanks again to Pat's Cap, and we'll see you guys all on Tuesday.